You were being bullied by your wife?
A tragedy in need of compassion.
She was banging my head against the wall. I just saw red.
Heartbeat, tonight at 8:30 on ITV.
A new man for Rachel means more complications for the Cold Feet clan tonight at 9:30.
This is a wonderful time of year to be a gardener. The soil's still warm because the summer sun hasn't quite left us yet, and there's plenty of rain around as well, so planting is wonderful. And there are plenty of essential jobs to be done before those frosts come. So John Ravenscroft this week is busy bowling up some bulbs, making sure of a splash of colour around Christmas time. Steve Bradley is back with us once again, telling us all he knows about how to take coleus cuttings. And Nigel Snow's hard at work on our lawn, making sure it gets its proper dose of autumn lawn care. But let's start with Reg Moore, who'll be showing us how to save our half-hardy plants, dahlias and cannas.
Well, now the autumn's coming on, it's time for us to have a look around the garden and collect up those plants that need some sort of protection to get them through the winter to give us colour again next year. So I've got one or two examples here that we can have a look at. First of all, we've got the dahlias here. Now, really, with these and with the cannas we'll be looking at later, it's better if we allow the frost to take the foliage off them. But in this case, I thought, well, I'll bring them in and show you how to do it so that you'll be all set up when the right conditions arrive. Now, the first thing to do, of course, is to dig your dahlias up, because it's these tubers here at the bottom that bring the plant back next year. And they only start to form these tubers as the days get shorter. So you dig your plants up, try and get most of the soil off them, as we've done here, and give them a bit of a wash even here we have. And then you just trim off the foliage, like this. There we go. I'll just put that on the floor. There we are, out of the way. And then there's our tubers. Now, it's a good idea, where you're dealing with various varieties, first of all, to put a label on them. Because once you've cut them all down like this, the varieties all look very similar. I'll just put that part of the clump over there, and we'll talk about storing this part. Now, you'll find there's all sorts of bits of root on here that you don't particularly want, so we can trim off quite a bit of this, this loose root. And then what I would do afterwards is to stand them upside down somewhere in a box, just to let them dry out a little bit. But of course, we haven't got time for that on the programme, so I'll continue with the storage method. So I'd leave them for about a week or so to dry out first. Then, after you've done that, give them a little dust over with some sulphur dust, like this. This will help to prevent them rotting. There we are. Give them a dust with that. And then we just get a box like this with some compost in it, or bark, or you could use vermiculite. Just sit them in it, like that, and cover them up, just leaving the top showing. And then you store those in a frost-free place. And next year we'll put them up and grow them on again. Now, here we have some cannas, these beautiful tall lily-like plants. And again, it's best if you let the foliage blacken with the frost, and it's similar, really, to a dahlia. You just cut them down like that, and you just strip off most of the soil if you can. In this case, though, you're not storing a tuber, you're storing this fleshy root part here, which we call a rhizome. It's just a fleshy root. Otherwise, it's the same sort of principle. You bury them in a box like this, dust them a bit with the sulphur dust, and they'll be okay. Another way of doing it, though, would be to just take your plant like this, if it's actively growing and you've got a heated greenhouse, and just cut it down like that, and then pop it into a pot, and just pot it up like that, and keep it potted in your greenhouse, and in that case it will flower much earlier for you the following year if you store them in that way. I just about get it all into the pot there. So that's the way to do those. And then in a subsequent programme we will have a look at storing begonias from tubers. I've got some plants here. They're not really quite ready to store yet. You need to let the foliage go yellow and die down to feed the tuber before you've got something good to store. So we'll look at those another week.
Today we're going to be propagating coleus cuttings. It's a plant that's grown for its attractive leaves, which is probably just as well, because when you look at the flowers, they're actually quite insignificant. As you can see from this, the plants start to get really large as they get a bit older, and this is only about a year old. So the best thing to do, if you don't have much room, take cuttings now. They can overwinter as small plants, because they root quite easily, and then you've got young plants that you can grow on through the spring and summer, and you'll finish up with something at least this size in a year's time. Now it's the tips, the shoots that you want. So remove these. Just take them off. Doesn't matter where you cut because you're going to throw the big plant away anyway. Get off as many as you need. Allow for a few mistakes. If the stems are thick, the best thing to do is remove the lower leaves so you can see what you're doing, and then lay the stem down on something firm like this tea tray that I've managed to collar here, and then cut against the hard surface. Remove carefully the lower leaves from the cutting, and you've got to be careful at this stage, otherwise the base might snap off. Prepare several cuttings. Keep plenty of clear area so that you can work easily. That's what you don't want. If you've got a shoot that's got a flower in the tip of it, the flower will actually impede rooting because the plant tries to produce seed. They can be grown from seed, but that's not the object of the exercise today. The flower's got to be taken out, and it can just be snapped out. The growth's quite soft and sappy. The other thing to look for, there are secondary flowers there as well, look, and they want to come out too. Take away these lower leaves, trim to the right length. You gradually build up a stock of cuttings. It's broken off again. They are pretty sappy. Take out the flowers. With that, there's nothing left, so just discard it. If you're worried about snapping the base of the cutting, just cut the leaves off. Check there's no flower bud in there. Now, I mentioned that these will root really easily, but if you're not that sure or you want to speed up rooting, you can actually use a rooting powder. The thing to remember is that don't just dip the cuttings into the pot, because if there's any disease on the base of this cutting, you transfer it into there, and so that everything else becomes infected as well. Also, with opening and closing the pot, this stuff only lasts about 18 months anyway. Dip the cutting in the powder, shake off any surplus, it doesn't need to be swimming in it, then just push the cutting into the compost. Same again, but before you do it on this one, if you've got any shoots left on the base, take them off, because if those shoots are left on and they go into the compost, they're only going to rot. Push in the cuttings. When you fill the tray, you just put them in. I'll start at this end. Quick water over. Not too damp because the leaves are hairy. And then on with the lid. It's finished.
It is raining heavens hard outside. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's forced me inside to the shed. I'm going to take a look this week at bulb planting, because this is one of the major bulb planting times of the year. And I think you need three basic bits of kit, really. First of all, a little advice, help and inspiration in the form of books. I picked out 3 just to have a little look at. This one I absolutely love. It's the RHS Guide to Bulbs. It tells you everything you could possibly want to know about each variety. There's a little photograph of each one. It tells you where to plant it, what sort of conditions each bulb likes, how to look after it, how it's going to grow for the future. A really good buy, and at the moment in some shops this is on special offer, so it's one to watch out for. If you want something a little bit more academic and profound, then this lovely book by Brian Matthew comes highly recommended. This is one of John Ravenscroft's favourite. It's got lots and lots of information in it, a little bit light on photographs, but what it is about is really the academic stuff on bulbs. But I really like this one. This is one of a series that's beginning to appear in garden centres now, and it reads rather like a magazine. If you want a little bit of inspiration, then this is the one. The photographs in it are lovely, and it has some beautiful planting ideas. All the details on those 3 books will be on the fact sheet. Second bit of basic kit is this bulb planter here. This is handy because it's got all the depths at which you plant different bulbs, and it's a very simple sort of idea. You plunge the bulb planter into the soil to make a hole. When you've made a hole, you pop your bulb in and then release the soil back on top. Nice, easy, quick job. Works very well in light and fine soil. Finally, there are these available this season. When you go to plant your bulbs, a few weeks later you may forget where you've put them. So, quite simply, plonk one into the soil. You'll never forget where you've put it. And at just over £1 each, they'll last you forever.
This is the new Vauxhall Zafira. Thanks to Flex 7 technology, it has 39 different seat combinations. Number 1, 7 seats. Combinations number 2 and 3. Number 14. 23. 38. Oh, is that the same as 11? No, I've done that one. There's one more in here somewhere. Kimberley, where are you?
Vauxhall, raising the standard.
These days, you don't have to take pills to fight pain. The fact is, I Believe is the best-selling topical painkiller for backache, rheumatic and common arthritic conditions. Why? Well, it could be because for pain relief without pills, nothing is more powerful, more effective, or works for more people than I Believe. Available only from pharmacies, I Believe Gel, Spray, and I Believe Mousse. I Believe means pain relief without pills.
Otex eardrops disperse earwax and can avoid syringing. Ask your pharmacist for the UK's #1 selling eardrops, Otex.
Well, that's madness! This is insane! They're breaking! Oh! There's nobody here. There's nobody. These are pebblers. A little bit dim.
It's all furry and they're nice.
Let's just try the flash. Very quick. Wasn't that quick? On the cheap. Oh!
UK Horizons, TV that makes life worth watching.
Identified. Haverset Nighthawk High Security Deadbolt. Access denied.
You know, part of autumn lawn care is something very simple, and that is just increase the height of the cut on your mower. Don't now continue cutting your lawn as short as it was all summer. Lift it up a bit. Something like this is quite adequate at this time of year. This is an inch and a half, and it will make all the difference. It will mean that the lawn will have a chance to put some growth on. The more growth it puts on now, the stronger it will be, and the more able it will be to resist fungal diseases and moss, which of course always come along during the winter months. Because what the winter means to the lawn is it gets colder, gets wetter. So it's drainage that we're thinking about, and a quick inspection now will certainly reveal if there's any moss or not. There's a bit of clover in here, which isn't really that much to worry about, but what we don't want is to find any wet spots, and any wet spots now need treating by going over with a fork or an aerator, work off a plank even, whatever you do, make sure that you don't get this waterlogging effect. Autumn and winter feeds, of course, are structured a totally different way. And what they tend to do, I mean there's quite a selection of them here, is that they thicken up the grass. The grass ends up not so much growing, not upwards, but sideways. It fills out. It becomes a lush, thick green carpet. And it makes a lot of difference. It's amazing how much difference it will make. The application of an autumn feed and then a spring feed will rid you of most of your pest and disease problems and even cultural problems. But one thing we can do at this time of year is the good old exercise with the spring rakes again, because the things that come out of here are amazing. There's all sorts of bits. And what it does is it breaks up the grass and it makes it grow thicker and tuftier again. It pulls up these rhizomes, it pulls up the creeping stems of weeds and the creeping stems of clovers, and it makes the whole thing thicken up. So raking over it, seeing to the drainage, and then applying a fertiliser specifically intended for the autumn use. And of course nowadays you can also get them including moss killers, which is a perfect time to put it on at the same time, and that way it will do two jobs at once. On a large lawn, of course, the way to apply fertilisers is by using something like this. It's easy to use. They do have on-off switches. Do use them. There's nothing worse than leaving it switched on while you turn around at the end of a row and you end up overdosing and having a bald patch. It happens so many times, but it is easy to remedy. But something I've only just come across is this little hand feeder here, and I've just put vermiculite in it to really show how it works. And it's got a calibration, so you can set it to whatever rate you want, and it's really like you would use for grass seeding as well, in that you spin the handle and that will, you see, as you walk up and down the lawn, it will apply your fertiliser to a swathe each way, so that way you can get a really good spread. Of course, the other thing at this time of year, if you have now got any patches, now's the ideal time to fill them in with some topsoil, add some grass seed to that. You will then end up with the whole thing knitting together, and by the time you get to the spring, of course, then your lawn will be as one. So a bit of care now, a bit of care with the feeding and the drainage, and it'll be amazing how well it will come out in the spring.
It is fun, and I greatly enjoy doing bowls of bulbs for Christmas, and on right into the new year in February. It's even more fun when it's pouring with rain like it is now, and the item I was going to do on autumn trimming heathers, and I'll have to wait till next week. But there are always things to do under cover. The bowl I'm holding is the one I like the best. It's a terracotta bowl, a good heavy grade too. There's a drainage hole, so we can't overwater it, and this is porous, and that really gives the best growing conditions. But you could not put it on top of furniture, because this porous base will leak onto the furniture. If you're going to have them outside for longer, a bowl of stoneware that's got a glazed side to it is better at standing frosty conditions. But what a lot of people are having to use is a typical plastic bowl like this, and obviously it doesn't have a drainage hole, so it's possible to overwater it. Though those are the options. What I'm starting with is a little daffodil. Now, 3 types of daffodils. This group need to have a little bit of winter on them before you bring them in the house. That's the native English daffodil and its dwarf forms. The one I'm putting in there is one I like the best, called W.P. Milner. This compost has gone a bit sort of solid, but the purpose of this compost is it's got more lime in than ordinary compost. All our bulbs really are lime lovers. Hardly I know of one that's not. So there's extra lime, there's extra grit. But if you know that and mix your own, that's fine. The daffodils go in nearly touching each other, and as long as we've got good drainage, I'll put them quite deep, because then when we put the compost on top,
that helps to hold the bulb up and stop it from falling over. You'll know when these are fit to bring in, because if you plunge these, or if you put them in the dark, the roots will come over the side in the dark, and then you'll see with a good root system, then you can bring them in. You can't do it before that. So that just gets covered in compost like this. It gets packed down, taken off, because we do have to leave room for water. That will sink a bit more yet. So that, outside, bit of shelter from the heaviest rain, I'd leave that till January. But this type, these are the Tazettas, the Paperwhites. They have no dormant period. So as soon as they've been bowled, they start to grow. So no need to give them this period of prolonged rooting. Maybe a month outside, cool, would be all that would be necessary. Done at this time of the year, they won't make Christmas, but if I'd been a month sooner, they would have done. Hyacinths are more normally put in bowls like this. No drainage hole again. The compost I've got on my bench is the same sort of compost. Here, with no drainage hole, I put my bulbs a bit higher up. Now, hyacinths, again, need a decent root system before you bring them in. And again, you need to see white roots, if they're plunged, poking over the top. You can tell a good hyacinth it has a broad basal plate. But please never go squeezing bulbs. Only occasionally does a daffodil let you down with basal rot. So, an uneven number I'd always do. Again, just filled over like that. Now leave them, as we've got no drainage hole, they can't be outside, certainly on a day like this. So one watering, then put them on their side, keep them cool and dark, the roots will come over here, then they'll be ready to bring in the house. And Marie, the pink, is always the one that makes Christmas the best. I have other things to pot, and I shall be doing them on other programmes. I shall also be doing the heathers. So on another occasion, we do tulips and crocus.
Well, first letter out of the post bag this week comes from Mrs. Brabiner in Pendleton. And Reg, she's worried about her Leyland hedge.
Yeah.
She's had it for about 20 years. It's beginning to go brown at the bottom in the growth. Some of them, she says, seem dry and wooden. If they need to be replaced, what advice can you give her? Or can she actually save them?
Right. Well, in the case of what is making them go brown, there can be all sorts of reasons. One is, although it's been wet a bit for the last couple of years, they could still be suffering from the drought years that we had before that. Right. They could be infested with either conifer aphids, which are getting quite widespread now, which cause brown areas, or they could have conifer spinning mites, which do similar things. They produce webs around about September, October time. But one thing is that if the bottom of them are going brown, they won't recover. They won't go back to being green again. I'm afraid Leylandi don't regrow from older wood. So, I mean, a hedge can certainly live beyond 20 years. There's no problem with that. So what I think I would do is perhaps assess how big those brown areas are. If they aren't very big, she could always disguise them by, when she trims the hedge, leaving one or two branches longer, and then pulling them across the bare area, a bit like, you know, the bald man combing his hair across the middle. And then that would grow over and cover that bald area. That would be one way, when she wouldn't, so she wouldn't have to lose her hedge, you know. And check to see if there's any stickiness there, or any little aphids present, and if there is, give them a spray with an insecticide to try and clear that out. But the hedge will certainly live longer than 20 years. If she wants to replace it with a conifer hedge, then I would go for Thuya plicator, the western red cedar. That grows about half the speed of Leylandi, but it gives you a lovely hedge. You can trim and keep it nice and thick, and to whatever height you want quite easily. And when you trim them, they have a lovely pineapple-y scent.
Ooh,
I quite like them.
Great. And do they grow as tall as the Leylandi?
They will grow as tall as Leylandi if you let them, but the best thing to do, even with Leylandi, is to trim them, you know, from when they're young, up the sides to keep them thin, and then let them get about a foot taller than you want them to be, and then cut them down to about 6 inches lower than you want them to be. Then they come back up with several shoots and make a square top to the hedge when you trim it.
Excellent, because I've got a Leyland hedge, so I'm going to treat mine like that. Thanks a lot. I am not going to adopt the Bobby Charlton approach, I have to say. So Mrs. Murphy's written to us now from Bolton. Now, she'd like to know about overwintering her fuchsias.
Yeah.
She has the garage, she says, but without heating. She's
Right.
just wondering how she should take care of them.
Right, well, we just brought this fuchsia along to just so we can show a lovely variegated fuchsia. These are super, aren't they?
You'd just grow it for the leaves, wouldn't you?
Well, yes, you would. They've still got lovely flowers, though, long, thin flowers. Yeah. But, well, if you overwinter a fuchsia, you've got two ways, really. Although if you've got just got a garage to keep it in, you've got one way. And, and that is to dry it out gradually, start to bring it in before the frosts, dry it out, and cut all the new growth away. So all you do is you keep the sort of base of the plant in a pot, ticking over in your garage, frost-free, through the winter, starting to growth in the spring.
Brilliant. And if you'd like to know anything more about fuchsias or anything else we've talked about this week, you can, of course, get our fact sheet, which this week is number 350, and you can get it, please, by sending a stamped self-addressed envelope to Gardener's Diary, Bridgemere Garden World, near Nantwich, Cheshire, CW5 7QB. And don't forget the phone lines. They'll be open in just a moment or two from now. The number, as always, to ring is 01270 520 455. And Reg and I are going to sit and enjoy this fuchsia for a little while. We hope the weather in your area is making your gardening variable. Till next week at the same time. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
It's a great Irish start.
He goes himself. Can he get there? He scores his second try.
But now they face a real test.
Australia have a score, surely.
Then, after an uneasy start,
And he can't get to it.
South Africa take on the minnows
And away and over.
of Spain.
He's got face the rampaging bull.
The Rugby World Cup. Today,
You cooperate, nothing will happen.